So food shortages are making headlines, but what in the world can you do about it? It's funny to think that it wasn't that many generations ago, grocery stores didn't even exist. So how did we survive? Well, there are a number of things you can do. But today I want to dive into one option, and this will allow you to fill your freezer with 1 year full of chicken for you and your family. You can opt out of the factory farming system.
So are you worried about food shortages? And do you have a yard that's at least 5,000 square feet? Then you can fill your freezer with a year's supply of meat in as little as 8 weeks by raising your own chickens. And in this video, I'm going to give you an overview of the entire process. Now, my name's Andy. I run a regenerative farm in southwestern Pennsylvania and the Appalachian Mountains. And I'm going to show you how we raise meat chickens here, but we can scale it down to a backyard homestead scale so that you can overcome these food shortages. On our farm, we practice principles that biomimic nature. So we raise our chickens in a manner that allows them to express their natural instincts, and we don't try to force them into a mold. So let's take a look at how you can do this in your own backyard. Now, before you start, you need to have a good plan going in, and know the equipment needed, and be set up and ready for when your chicks arrive. By the end of this video, you should have enough knowledge to raise your chicks from 1 day old to process day. As we go through this video, you will see some of the supplies you will need. So for the sake of not being redundant right here at the beginning of the video, we'll get to all that later. But first, you'll need to find a good place to get your chicks. There are plenty of hatcheries all over the country. There's Hoover's Hatchery, Moyer's Hatchery, Myers Hatchery, and a whole lot of other ones out there. Literally, if you go on Google and search for chicken hatchery, you will get a whole list of them. Once you find one you like, you can go ahead and order. Now, this video is kind of centered around raising the Cornish cross breed of chicken. However, you can do other ones, but they do take longer. A Cornish cross chicken can be ready in as little as 8 weeks. If you decide to go with one of the other breeds, there's another real popular one called the Freedom Rangers. You can do them as well. They won't be quite as meaty, and they take a little longer to raise, but they are better foragers. So they will do a little bit better on pasture, but it's not going to be a drastic difference. A Cornish cross is more so the kind of meat that you're used to buying in the store. You're just going to raise it a lot differently, and the flavor and quality of the meat is going to be way better than you can get from any grocery store. So before your chicks arrive, you need to have what's called our brooder ready. I will link to a video right here about setting up a brooder. A brooder can be something as big as what's behind me, or it can be smaller like a Rubbermaid tote. It doesn't have to be fancy. Now, for your brooder, you want to plan 1/2 square foot per baby chick, and that will get you to about 3 to 4 weeks of age. And make sure you have enough bedding, because once they get closer to that 3 to 4 week age, they're going to soil that bedding a lot faster, so you want to keep adding more bedding to it. Don't necessarily clean the bedding out, just add more wood chips to it. A lot of farm supply stores or pet stores will have those wood shavings. That'll work just fine. But the whole purpose of a brooder is to keep your baby chicks warm during a time where they don't have feathers and they can't regulate their body temperature. Once they hit about 3 to 4 weeks, they'll have their feathers grown out and they can go outside. Also, when starting your chicks off in a brooder, you want to make sure you give them what's called grit. Grit is basically just tiny little rocks. Chickens do not have teeth, so they can't chew. They just swallow their food whole. Then there's an organ inside them called a gizzard. The gizzard is a strong muscle where all their food goes, but they also eat things like small rocks, and the muscle will contract and grind those rocks against their food, essentially grinding up all their food. That is kind of like a chewing motion, but it's all done internally in a muscle. So you want to give them some sort of grit that they can use to grind up that food. Another thing to mention while we're talking about feed, it's good to go for the better quality feed. Don't skimp out. If you buy the cheap stuff, your meat will taste cheap. The kind of feed that you choose will affect the flavor of the meat. So make sure you're getting a high quality feed. If you have a local farmer that grows his own grains, all the better. I would go with that option. But if you don't, just try to look for the best possible quality you can get. Trust me, when it hits your dinner table, you will be thankful. So inside this brooder behind me, we have baby chicks that are less than 1 week old. So let's take a look in there and see how we're doing it. Okay, so here we are inside our brooder, and in here we have approximately 150 chicks. Now remember, you just need 1/2 square foot per chick. So if you're only doing 20 chicks, you only need 10 square feet. Now when you're ordering your chicks, make sure you order a little more than you want. Expect a loss. Just plan for 10%. It's probably going to be way less than that. but just plan for a 10% loss. It's very natural that not every single chick is going to make it. Some just aren't strong enough. You get run to the litter and they just can't pull through. But in here we are using our heat lamps to keep them warm. You'll notice we have the heat lamps in one section, the other side we do not. That way if they get too cold, they go under the heat lamps. If they get too warm, they can move away from them. And they can use that to regulate their temperature. Again, there's a lot more information if you check out my video on how to set up a brooder, but this is how they start off in the brooder. Now we're going to fast forward a little bit and see a group of chicks that are 2 weeks old now. So let's go hop over to that brooder and check them out. Now in here, this is a much larger brooder. Keep in mind this is for doing things on a little bit of a larger scale. Again, if you're doing smaller batches, it doesn't have to be something like this. Like I mentioned before, a Rubbermaid tote will work just fine for a small batch of chicks. In fact, a lot of people do that. But this group here, they are about 2 weeks old, so this is what they look like when they're about 2 weeks. And there's one thing I want to point out here that we're doing with our feed, is we actually soak it a couple days prior with unchlorinated water. That allows it to ferment. There's actually a video I made on how to ferment your feed. But essentially all you're really going to do is put some feed in a bucket, soak it, mix it up, put a lid on it, and let it sit for 2 days. When you open it up, it should smell like sourdough bread, and it should be nice and fermented. The whole reason for that is to unlock more nutrients in the feed. Whenever you ferment something, the bacteria goes to work and actually breaks down what's called anti-nutrients and unlocks the full potential of the nutritional value of that food. So your chickens will actually gain more nutrition from less feed. Again, if you check out my channel, I have a video on how to do that as well. While they're in this brooder stage too, you'll notice that we're using these long feeders. You can use these or bowls like this, whatever works. These feeders, along with a lot of other equipment that you will need to raise these chickens, are in the description below. A lot of it you can order right off of Amazon or find at your local feed store, but I'll link to a lot of that below. Now, one thing to note here, I know you can't see the whole brooder, but you'll notice the chickens are spaced out and they're not panting. That means they're very comfortable at this temperature. If you see them spread out and panting, they're too hot. So if you have these heat lamps, maybe turn a heat lamp off, maybe even two. Really depends on how many you're using. But you basically just want to get the heat down a little bit and get the temperatures a little bit colder. Now, if you see them all huddled up in a tight ball, that means they're too cold. And they could actually die, because what happens is they'll start to group up tightly in a ball, and the ones in the middle get buried, and then they suffocate and can't breathe, and you'll find them dead at the bottom of the pile. So make sure you keep them warm enough, but not too warm. What you're seeing here is perfect. They're all spread out, they're happy, and they're not panting. Now at that younger age, like you saw in there, you may see them huddled up around a light. That's okay as long as it's not like a super tight ball. Really, it's ideal that we see maybe some under the light and then some others running around. That means they're comfortable. So you want to try to maintain temperatures to achieve that. Now we keep our chicks in brooders for 4 weeks. You can do 3 weeks depending on the temperatures and the climate of your area and how well your birds are growing. Typically Cornish cross, by 3 weeks they should be ready for most warmer climates, but if you're in a colder climate, I would hold off and wait a little bit. But really, once you get a few weeks in like these guys are, you're pretty much out of the danger zone. You may have some losses earlier on in that first week or two. After that, you really shouldn't experience much loss. But just don't be surprised if you find a dead chick or two whenever they're in their first week or two of age. But really, when they're in the brooder stage, just keep an eye on the temperature, make sure they have feed, clean water, and make sure their bedding is somewhat clean. It's okay if it's a little soiled, but don't let it get too bad. Ideally, it's better to catch it before it gets too bad and just add more wood chips. Be a little proactive about it. If you see it getting too soiled, just add more wood chips on top. You don't have to clean the old ones out, just keep adding new. And at that point, once you get them to 4 weeks old, which these guys are just a couple weeks away from that, they will be ready to go out to the pasture. So let's go take a look at what it looks like in the pasture and how we raise them that way as well. So after they come out of the brooder and we move them into the pasture, they go into one of these. This is essentially a shelter without a floor that we can move every single day. On the front of it, On the front of this, there's a rope handle that I can just grab and pull forward. So it's a completely movable structure that leaves the grass open to our chickens and protects them from predators. This way we can control their movement right over the land. Now in the brooders, I said you need about half a square foot per chicken. In a chicken tractor, you want about 1.6 square foot per chicken. So if you want to raise enough chickens for 1 year, I would say get a batch of 75 chickens. You may have some losses in there, but that should be enough for 1 year's supply of meat for you. And a chicken tractor this size, which is a 10 by 12 foot chicken tractor, that's 120 square foot, 75 chickens in here is a perfect number. Reason why we shoot for that number is because it's a perfect nitrogen load to your soil. If you have too many chickens in here, they lay a lot of manure down, and the nitrogen buildup is too much for the soil to metabolize. With 75 chickens, the soil can metabolize that amount, and then you would just move it every single day. So you're dispersing that manure across your land evenly. Not only that, but these chicken tractors also encourage freshness. By moving this every day, your chickens aren't sitting in their own manure. They also get a fresh salad bar every day of grasses. By leaving in one spot, you not only build up all that nitrogen, they sit in their manure, and they eat all that grass down to become just a barren dirt yard like most chicken runs. In this system, you'll actually build your lawn and raise chickens at the same time. You add fertility, build soil, capture carbon, and feed yourself and your family for a year, all by doing this style with daily moves. Now when you move them out from the brooder to the chicken tractor, you'll need to use something like a crate or even a pet carrier, a dog cage, whatever. But you would load your chickens up, bring them out to the chicken tractor, and put them in. You don't have to build something this exact design, but as long as it's a nice portable shelter that can keep them safe from predators, and you can move it every day. And there's no floor, so they have open access to the ground below. Make sure they have shelter from the rain, but also they get some sunlight as well. On this one, it's a 10 by 12 structure, and on the top roof, we have 3/4 of it covered. Now you can continue using this method all the way up until they're ready to butcher, which is week 8, 9, or 10, depending on your desired size and feeding schedule. But usually by week 8, 9, or 10 is usually when you'll have your chickens ready to butcher. And if you want to keep using this chicken tractor all the way until then, that's perfectly fine. On our farm, we're experimenting with a new method, so we leave them in here for 2 weeks, and then we switch them to another model, which I will go show you right now. All right, so this is a new system that we're trying this year, and after they did 2 weeks in a Joel Salatin style chicken tractor, what we do is we move them to another system like this. We have another chicken tractor here, but we took most of the sides off of it so the chickens can come in and out. And we surrounded this area with Premier One poultry netting with a solar charger, so it has an electric charge to help keep predators out and keep the chickens in. Now this entire system can get moved just like the chicken tractor. We're just moving a much larger area at one time. If you check out this video here, I go into a little more detail on how this system works and some of the equipment used, like the fencing and the solar charger. But in this system, we keep moving it until our chickens reach a mature level. So like I said, these chickens are 6 weeks old, so we're gonna keep moving this system until our chickens reach a size that we want. Depending on your feeding schedule and how big you want them, that could be week 8, 9, or 10. But we actually have some chickens that are almost at maturity level right now, so we'll go take a look at them. So these chickens here are coming up on 9 weeks old. We grow ours out a little bit slower than most. Typically by 9 weeks, most people's chickens are bigger than these, but we control their feed amount a little bit and make them forage off the land a little more. And by doing that slower growth and forcing them to forage more, we think it really increases the quality of the meat. So what we're gonna do a little bit later this week is come in here and take some of these chickens, some of the bigger ones, and process them. We're gonna leave the smaller ones to grow another week, so we will butcher them at week 10. Again, this is longer than most people do. Most people will butcher at 8 weeks, maybe 9 weeks. But what I do here is 9 and 10 week grow out. But when these guys are ready to process, you then have 2 options. You can either process yourself, or you can find a local processor to process for you. If you process yourself, there's a video here that you can see all the equipment you'll need to get started. Otherwise, you need to find a local processor. A good place to start is go to your local farmers markets and ask around. Ask some of the farmers there if they know of anybody who processes chickens. They'll probably lead you in the right direction. You can also go online, do searches online, or go to Facebook and find your community Facebook groups and just ask in there. If you're planning on having someone else process your chickens for you, I would make sure you have that set up ahead of time before you even order your chicks. Schedule a date and have everything set to go with a processor. That way you aren't scrambling trying to find one when you have chickens ready to be processed and no one can do them for you. Now, if you're going to do it yourself, it actually is a lot easier than most people may think, and you can get the equipment you need and still be relatively budget friendly. I'll be sure to make a video on how to process your own chickens, and when I do, I'll link to that here. But that's going to be a separate video, and there's a lot more involved in that. Again, I would probably check out some of the other videos on my channel. In this video, I kind of skimmed over a lot of things and went really high level detail. A lot of my other videos talk about some of the same stuff, but it goes into a little more detail. But this is a great way to overcome all these food shortages that are making news headlines right now. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. I plan to bring you a lot more information like this, so hit that like button down below and subscribe to my channel. And if you have any questions or comments, let us know in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching, and until next time.